Hello, I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona. This fall, I went to the Renaissance Fair in Minneapolis and walked around all the artist booths. One booth in particular stood out to me. It was a ceramic booth, and I could see that the pieces in this booth were really exceptional. So I met the artist of these pieces, and I found out that she lives right here in Winona. Today we get a chance to meet her, and she's going to show us her studio and also show us how she creates one of her beautiful ceramic pieces. Walking around the studio and glancing here and there, I find a huge variety of sculptures, vases and pottery in various shapes and sizes, huge urns and wonderful wall hangings, some with mirrors and some with candles, but all with lovely ceramic backgrounds. I see winged cherubs in Indian designs with sun faces, Celtic patterns, beautiful colors, and fabulous sculpted faces. Anyone can see that there has been a creative artist working diligently to produce wonderful treasures for the enjoyment of many. It's not very often that we find a really true artist in Winona who does such magnificent work. And today I'd like to introduce Lynette Power, the creator of all these great ceramics. Hi, Lynette.
Hi, Joyce.
Welcome to the Spirit of Winona.
Thank you.
Well, you have such wonderful, diversified work here. Can you tell me first off on how did you ever get started in ceramics?
Well, I've been doing little crafty things all my life. I remember with my grandma knitting and crocheting and sewing and stuff like that. And then when I was in my early 20s, I started doing macrame hangers. Remember the macrame hanger phase? So, and then I wanted to have some clay pots to go in my hangers. And I was actually doing little art fairs with my macrame hangers, too. So my husband at the time traded a pottery wheel for building a chimney for a lady. And so I got a pottery wheel.
Tell me a little bit about some of the pieces. Like maybe show me some of your beginning pieces, and let's take it to where you're at right now.
These pieces here are some of my earlier work here. The casserole. Oops, that's got stuff in it.
Well, that's what it's for.
Yeah. So I would make the pieces, but I always had to do a little something special for decorating. And I was inspired by some artists that were really putting some funky stuff on there, just squishing clay around and a lot of character. From the table functional ware, I started hearing about these little oil lamps that were just selling like crazy. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try them. Okay, here's one of my very early oil lamps. And they have a little glass fiber wick that goes down inside and a bead. And then somebody said, oh, they'd be so cool on the wall. So then I thought, I'm going to try that and mounted them on a slab. Put a little mirror behind them, and for many, many years my shows were, that's all I would be showing. So from the oil lamps, then I took a sculpture class and I learned how to do body casting, and I took a cast of Brianna, my youngest daughter's face when she was 11. And this piece here was one of my first face pieces.
Oh, it's beautiful. Is this Brianna?
Yep.
Oh,
here's another earlier piece that is her face also. This one's a nice warm. I really like this one.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And then the texture around it, put it on a slab and then just embellish it with texture.
How do you cast the face?
Well, for her, if you're going to do a live cast, we put straws in her nose and Vaseline her face and then put plaster on her face. It's sort of a scary process because it takes about 10 minutes to set up and she's got to breathe through the straws. Then from this, then I started just sculpting my own faces. And so my work changed a little bit. And this is a current piece. And this is one of the little sculpted faces, no longer the live casting. Each face comes out of a mold, but the original was sculpted. This is a slab here, and then I kind of prop it up with some pieces of foam and kind of billow it a little bit. And then there's an extra piece of texture here, textured clay that's added here, And there's another piece of textured clay here and another one here. So I guess this one's got 1, 2, 3, 4 different slabs plus the little face piece.
This is quite a change from the
Yeah.
pots to this beautiful ceramic hanging. Now tell me, you've got some wonderful pieces throughout this room, like some rather big pieces behind us. Tell us how you would do this gorgeous piece behind us with the two faces.
That would be a similar technique to the top part of it, to building this. However, for the bottom part, I'd take a slab for my bottom slab, and I have to arch it because otherwise the shrinkage and the distortion in the drying process will crack the bottom. Then I took a big slab and stood it up, and you've got to support them inside, and you dry them a little bit so that they're so that they can kind of support their own weight. And then I had a top part that had the faces in it. So you have to kind of build these pieces from the bottom up, getting the clay at the bottom harder so that it'll support the weight of those newer attachments going on.
It's a magnificent
It is.
piece.
It's very tricky to do.
By studying anatomy and becoming a massage therapist in her spare time, Lynette is understanding the human body and sculpting it in her workshop. By doing so, it is enabling her to create even more magnificent pieces.
So these are all bas reliefs, and here's a very shallow relief, and here's a very deep relief. And this is some of my earliest clay sculptures here. Although you can see that the anatomy form is very abstracted, and that I didn't have a lot of knowledge, so I kind of fudged it and camouflaged it with all these frilly things. Well, so in my studies and in training, I have been taking classes and workshops that were much more articulate, learning the skill of sculpting the human body. When the body starts to move and go into other positions, everything's changing. And you really have to learn to see your forms and then to translate them into clay.
Lynette demonstrates for us how she creates the fabulous textures onto one of her anatomy pieces once she has completed the sculpture and molding process.
This is one of my torso pieces, textured torso pieces, and I'm gonna just show you how I layer in all these different pieces, textures, and we're gonna make in a little bit smaller mold. My original sculpture would have been like laying here on the table, and then all this plaster mold gets made over the original sculpture, and then I turn it upside down, and now I can lay my layers of clay in there. One of my favorite little tools is these little springs, and I buy these at Fleet Farm, and I'll pull it apart and put little handles on the end of it so that I get a little tool that looks like this. I've got my slab, and it's kind of a long skinny slab, and I'm going to take and drag my corrugated wire through the slab, and then I get this interesting texture I can vary the rhythm of how how I pulled a wire through it and get all different kinds of effects, either busier or a little bit simpler. And then, in order to, since this is still sort of a tight pattern, I'm going to just slap it on the table and kind of pull as I slap. And then that moves the clay around, and I get a nice fluid effect to it. Now this is going to go into my mold, and I like to use this fluid pattern on the edges. This is another little pattern that I like to use. That is a needlepoint canvas, I guess you would call it, would be the best way to describe that. So I'll do another little slab, and then just roll it into the needlepoint and pull it off. So then I have a little texture like that, and I just want to use little pieces of it, so maybe I'll just try tearing it. I don't want too much of this, but just a little bit. Okay, and now I cut a slab, which I'm going to texture with some lace. So I have to kind of see what shape I'm going to need here. I'm going to need it a little thicker because this is going to have to tie everything together. This is just yardage of lace. They use it on wedding gowns and evening dresses and whatnot from your local fabric shop. So with a rolling pin, I roll that texture in, pull it off, and voila, I have a nice lace pattern on my clay. And then that gets laid into my mold here, and then I'm going to use this slab to kind of tie everything together. Work it down into the deepest spots in the mold. This is just a little wad of clay, and it's wrapped up in a plastic bag and then a sock so it doesn't stick to my other clay. But it's a nice, soft, rounded form that I can just kind of pound my clay into the mold. But I have to be careful not to pound too hard, or else I'm going to pound out all my textures that I've just worked into there. So now I need to build a little bit of structure in there. And then I have to have handles to hang it from. So put them down in here. Now I'm going to trim off all this excess clay. And then after drying it a little bit, it should be fine when we flip it out. So here it goes. Okay. That works pretty good. Whoops. Hello. It's just so wonderful how beautiful the human body is. It's so miraculous. And I have enjoyed dancing and rollerblading and biking and running for a number of years in each of those different activities. And I've just enjoyed the movement in my body too. So that's what I'm really trying to communicate. That's what I'm trying to express, is that beauty of the body and the enjoyment of the movement in with my art and my clay work.
Wonderful. Now, Lynette, I'm wondering if you would mind showing us the process, the actual process of how you develop one of these pieces.
Okay, I can do that.
Which piece can we do, do you think?
We're going to do this piece, a piece like this, similar to this.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go see how it's done.
Okay.
This is where it all begins, with a little bag of clay over here. And from this bag of clay, you get your finished piece. And we're going to see how you make this beautiful piece. Okay. Well, tell us all about it.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to prepare the clay, and there's two different techniques or methods here. This is a wheel-thrown piece, and this will be a slab. We also have a little part here. The handle's been extruded, and there's a little ball at the bottom to kind of hold the lamp away from the slab so that the shade will fit on, and that's also a little extruded part. So I will, first of all, show you the wedging process for preparing the clay to go on the wheel and be wheel thrown. And then we're going to cut a slab and put it through the slab roller here. And then there's some more processes to prepare the slab, but that'll be the first stage. This is how my clay comes. I purchased my clay all conditioned for me. It's a number of mixtures of different types of clay. And this is a very white body. I like to work with the white because then my colors, with a white background or white base to them, all the colors are a lot more dynamic. So they come in, these boxes are 50-pound boxes, and then each one has two bags in it, which are 25 pounds each. And in order to work it, I have to cut it into smaller chunks in order to do this wedging process. So for me, that size was pretty good.
You sure made that look easy. So what is this exactly?
This is fishing line. It's a leader you can buy it out at Fleet Farm, and it's just a fishing line, so that the walleyes and northerns can't bite through your right by your hook there.
And then you tie it on these two rings.
Yeah. And then this is a lot like kneading bread is one way of thinking of it, but you do have to be careful to do it in a manner where you won't be wedging air into it. The whole idea is to get the moisture on the inside of the bag and all the clay particles all lined up. So when you put it on the wheel to throw it, they're all kind of going the same direction and in harmony.
You really have to build up some muscles to do this job, don't you?
Yeah, and there's a little technique to it too, of kind of rolling this, taking it from the back and rolling it over. And what you'll be ending up with, I'll kind of spread it out here a little bit more, so you can see this nice little spiral that happens in there. But at the same time, like I was saying, you got to be careful that you don't fold it so much that you get a bubble of air trapped in there. Okay, so this is ready to go.
Lynette takes the hump of clay to her potter's wheel to throw it into 11 different lamps.
Okay, now the first thing I have to do is I have to get it centered. So this centering process is one of the hardest things for people to learn, and one of the main tricks that I learned many years after I had been throwing clay was you have to kind of view it like a clock, and you use the palm of the pad, big pad on your thumb, and you push in at 7 o'clock, and then with this hand up here, you push in at 1 o'clock, and voila, it just goes right up.
Oh, okay. You make it look very easy.
Yeah, but there's an efficiency in your muscles. It's kind of an ergonomic type of thing that at that point you have the most strength in your arm muscles, and a lot of times kids are trying to, at schools or when people are learning, they're just trying to push straight in, and the arms are very weak in that position. So
you keep moving up while you're pushing.
You start at the bottom and push it up, and it's kind of, they call it wedging on the wheel. So now I'm going to make a little hole here, and I have done so many of these that I know how much clay I want to divide out. So that's what I've just done. This is how much clay is going to be in my first little lamp. So then the throwing process is just, the pressure on one finger inside and then one finger on the outside. So I just get it thinned out as much as I can, and when I'm getting it, you start feeling a loss of control. It feels like the clay is going to go out of control and just splatter all over the place when you've got it just right.
So you want that?
You want it as thin as you can get it and still have the control. Okay, so there's pretty much my basic shape. Now I'm going to put a little neck on it, and these little oil lamps need to have a little rim on them here because that's where the glass shade is going to sit, and that's very precise. Then I'm going to check myself with my calipers, and that's a little bit small, but I think I'm going to take that because I'll probably give it a little more room, and then I'd rather have it be too small than too tight. It's moving so quickly that, if it goes out of center, you've lost it. And I still do that, but not very darn often. And now I want it to be a very, very nice, sharp, square corner, so I use this little rib, and that's going to go in. Because my glaze is going to run off the pot in a couple directions, and it's going to go into this groove, so I really want to have a little bit of extra definition there. And then I define the bottom a little bit more with the tool, and then again my wire, and cut it right off, and there's my oil lamp.
After the lamp is dry, Lynette takes it to a smaller wheel and smooths out the rough edges.
Because this lamp is going to be up in the air, and you want to have a nice graceful bottom. So I'm going to trim the bottom. But now this particular lamp has dried for overnight. Or sometimes I put them under fans and I can get them dry a little more quickly. So this little clamp just kind of closes in on the piece and holds it steady for me while I trim the bottom on it. Now for the slab part of it, this is a frame with again this fishing line wires on it, and I have them measured to know about how much I need for each one of my styles, designs. Just push that through, and then this little end is kind of hard to get, so I roll it over, and then I pull it up through the rest. So now I have to have a very consistent thickness to each one of these slabs. So I'm going to use the slab roller here to roll each one of these little squares out into the proper thickness. So this is a canvas, just a big canvas cloth. There's two great big rollers in here that have, it's like sandpaper on it, so it's going to grab the canvas and just keep rolling this and whatever's in the canvas through and squeeze it down to like the old wringer washer machine type of things. Now that it's through the slab roller, we just pull this curtain back, or canvas back, and here's our slabs. Now the sandpaper on the rollers has left quite a bit of texture. I don't know if you can see that there, but so we need to take that off because that's really gonna be in the pattern if we don't remove it. So we put it over here on the boards, and now I'm going to introduce Anne. This is Anne Ward. She's been working with me for 3 years. And
hi, Anne. Hello. Okay, so you're actually going to do the process for us. So you actually just use a rolling pin.
A rolling pin, and that doesn't quite do it. There's still kind of the cloth texture on it. So then we need to go a little bit deeper, and then we use this just scraper here. So now we're going to lay some lace out on this piece. So we just kind of do a light scoring of the clay, and then the lace is going to get laid on there just so we know where the lace should go. And then after we get the lace imprint, and then we'll come back and we'll actually cut the clay to the pattern. This lace, I think, actually came from St. John's in the Virgin Islands. Oh, is that right? And I've also gone to, when I was in Italy, I also had to go to the lace stores there, and it's always really fun shopping for lace. But the newer lace is much lighter and a little bit busier, and it's really hard to find lace that has a distinctive pattern that I can use for this now.
So you just go around your template again on top of the lace, and that doesn't smash the lace down?
No, just real lightly lay it on there. You have to be a little careful, but there we go.
Oh, it's lovely. It really imprints well, doesn't it? Beautiful.
And then the edge is cleaned up with a little sponge just to get all the little cutting little blobs of clay off of there. We're going to assemble one so you can see how the process goes. On the little stump that we're going to put on, it's important to score them first so that the surface is roughed up, and then we put slip on it, and then that acts as the glue, and just squish it down on there a little bit. And then we need to score this piece here, and then our little lamp also has to be scored. And then a little layer of slip goes in there.
And what is exactly a slip?
This is the clay that's been diluted with water.
Okay, and it acts like an adhesive as well.
Yep, and I need to slip both surfaces. And then it goes on. Now here for the handle too, I'll score the handle and slip. And then on this little extrusion, that this little piece was extruded out of a little hole, and then so I've got 6 little points on the extrusion, and when I twist it, then it gets a nice little curl, and kind of center it, and then just push it in there, and with the slip, that's going to stick on for the whole process. It's permanent. Now, because I've got my oil lamp and I want my shade to sit on there nice and straight, now I have to take a square, and I check and make sure that it's nice and square going this way. And I also want to make sure that shade is going to point right up to the center of the lamp, so I take a caliper and then I do fine adjustments this way. And then I get my lamps nice and square on my piece. Okay, this will dry for about 4 days, and then it's going to go into the bisque kiln. And the bisque kiln gets fired to 1800 degrees. And so that'll take a day to fire that kiln and about 10 hours to cool down. Then when it comes out of the bisque kiln, it will go over and we'll glaze it. So we can go and look at that process now.
Anne removes incense burners from the bisque kiln, which were fired the day before and are now ready for the glazing process.
These are a couple of buckets of glaze, and I make up my glazes, in 5-gallon quantities. And I have a bunch of chemicals downstairs, so I go and weigh out I have little, like they're cake recipes. Now this has been bisqued, and what bisquing does is it dries out the molecular water. I mean, the greenware is dry, but there is still molecular water in it. So the bisquing up to 1800 degrees actually dries even that molecular water out. So now when this goes into this water, this piece is so thirsty for water, it's just going to soak up all the water in the glaze. And just watch what happens. It's going to be dry in just a few seconds.
Oh, it's drying quickly.
See how quick that dries? And I have these little ear syringes here, and they all have little different color glazes in them. So we just splash a little bit of some other colors on them. Here, this was a clear glaze, and there's a little bit of the green and then that red glaze that I just splashed on. And this is blue. This usually turns a little bit more blue, but it depends on my atmosphere in the kiln. So there's always little surprises in the kiln. I never know exactly what I'm going to get.
Now we have your piece, the sample of the piece that you just glazed, and you put all this different color on it, and we have no idea what this is going to look like.
No.
But now this would go inside this kiln.
Correct.
And how long would it stay in there?
That would be in there for 16 hours of firing, and it would be cooling for 16 hours also. And then we would pull it back out and have a beautiful glazed piece at the end.
Well, can we open it up? And I think you probably have some finished pieces in there. Let's
take a
look at those.
I have a few finished pieces in there, yeah.
Looks like a baker's oven.
Yep.
Now, and I see you do have some finished pieces in there. Well, just like a railroad car, you pull it right out.
Anyway, I wanted to show you how this shelving looks. We have these. This is it's special material that can withstand that high fire, those high temperatures, and they're very heavy. They're very heavy, and so this whole thing gets stacked up to. The whole thing gets stacked up to, what'll fit through that door there. And then I also stack pottery on those shelves all the way around the inside of the kiln, too. So it's a lot of pottery that goes into it. Pieces. Yeah. It's supported with the fire bricks like this. These are also special refractory materials. And
you have some
just
wonderful
layer
pieces
it up.
in here. These are so beautiful.
Those are our newest Celtic designs. We carved those this winter.
And then will you put a mirror in here?
Yes. That one actually may be a clock. That looks like the clock size, but we put mirrors and clocks in them.
Oh, this is a lovely piece. Now, how did you get this image in here?
That's a little press mold. I have a whole assortment of little press molds, and the little cherubs and dragons and stuff that I put on stuff, they're all done with little press molds. And you just take a little piece of clay and push it into the mold.
Lynette, I see you have one of the little lanterns in here that we just made together, and I watched you make.
Yep.
It's very pretty.
But now this one is just the basic iron wash that we talked about earlier. And it's not that we also will have the glazed, shiny surfaces on them. These are kind of a matte, simple finish, but the other ones will be shiny with lots of color on them.
Then I assume now you attach a mirror in here, you put your little wick in here, and you're all finished.
Yep, and then we're off to shows with it.
Okay, and what would a piece like this sell for at the show?
That one is probably about a $45 piece.
Well, it was so interesting watching the whole process. It certainly is worth that amount. It's incredible the amount of work that goes into it.
There's a lot of work that goes into them.
I've really enjoyed the creative process of developing that. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for the wonderful tour.
Thank you, Joyce.
Okay. This has been Joyce Woodworth on the Spirit of Winona. Please join me again next week. Till then, enjoy the Spirit of Winona.
All of Lynette's beautiful ceramic pieces can be purchased at her studio located at 252 East 8th Street during the annual Bluff Country Studio Art Tour at the end of April.